David Margolin, and this is another edition of the Subseasonal Forecast Contest. I'm going to walk you through my forecast process for today, and really the purpose of these calls is to give forecasters, especially new forecasters, um, diverse viewpoints in terms of how forecasters interpret the information and come to a forecast. So today's mark date or initialized date is October 1st, and we're forecasting for the subseasonal, in this case, days 16 to 20, which will verify October 16th, October 20th. All right, so first of all, I'll show you my bottom line here. I am input number one down here on the bottom. So for this week, we switched over from CDDs to HDDs. So we're forecasting now in gas-weighted HDDs. That's what a lot of the market does at this point as we shift into October. Um, so my HDD number was just under 40 HDDs, spread 13.7, or sort of a measure of the uncertainty. And here's my formula statement on the bottom. So what I did for today, I'm starting to shift out of sort of my winter mode into my, or sorry, out of summer mode into winter mode. And by that, what I really mean is in the summer, my experience and most of the research that I've conducted has shown that the sort of the climate shift is having a more significant influence in summer statistics, summer climate, than winter climate. So I put in the summer, I put a lot more weight on things like the 10-year normal, trend, um, and sort of the hottest periods. In the winter, I start to shift my weight back to the 30-year normal. And there's some precedence for this even in the forecast contest. If you look through our archive, you'll see, and I'll show you this actually real quick. Last year in the heating season, the normal 30-year performed, better than the 10-year. But so far in the cooling season, it's been just the opposite. The normal 10-year up here at 20.8, positive numbers are good, and the 30-year is down here. So again, I think there is a fair amount of data that supports this, and just sort of my own observations suggest that now that we're starting to shift into the heating season, I should start to shift my formula weightings. And that's what you see here. So I didn't go full scale, but I'm just starting to nudge things a little bit away from the 10-year and a little bit more to the 30-year. Beyond that, I did my usual sort of analysis of the pattern. I looked at, thanks to Maxar here, I looked at the guidance for the 16 to 20 from both the CFS and the ECMWF. I also like to look at the 1 to 5, 6, 10, 11 to 15. In some cases, you'll see some changes in the 1, 5, 6, 10, 11 to 15, and especially the short range models that may not yet be illustrated in the 16 to 20. So I always think it's a good idea to kind of sync up in terms of what the shorter range guidance is doing and the longer range. But the bottom line today here is when you look at the forecast for the next 15 days, the models are still very anomalously warm, as it's been for now a while here. We've seen a couple different, at least two, maybe three verification periods come in really warm, warmer than most of the expectations from our folks in the forecast contest, and also the model inputs. And you can see here as we look at this forecast, I'll start in the short range, hour 72. You can see a trough out in the west and ridge in the east, usually indicative of warm pattern, anomalous warmth. As we shift to the 610 at hour 192, still mostly that kind of pattern, although there's a little bit of a hint of a trough in the northeast. And then 312, and by the way, this is the EC ensemble, still kind of what, if verified, would be anomalous warmth and below normal HDDs. And then looking into the 16 to 20, here's the ECM, I'm sorry, 16 to 20, here's the ECMWF, kind of broad ridging. There's a little bit of a hint here now of a change, though. You can see if this trough digs a little bit further, it would not be a stretch to see a trough here in the eastern United States. But all that being said, the bottom line is in terms of my formula, I did not go over here. I did not see enough to skew based on some of the other information. My formula was based solely on this information here too. I do want to mention, and you can see this in my strategy statement, I did spend a fair amount of time looking at the MGO and some of the different MGO products. I definitely recommend folks who are kind of getting into this to look at Caitlin's product. You can see the link up here. It's a great calendar for MGO guidance. And Paul Rounday also, one of the leaders in ENSO and MGO research, has some great links here. This is an experimental MGO forecast tool. Again, I think it's certainly something that's well worth looking at. And what's interesting about Paul's tool here is that as you get out into um, the end of our forecast period here, it does show a transition to a cooler pattern. And so I think that is something to watch for. Um, but at the end of the day, looking at the various MGO tools, including things like the RMM forecast we have here, I did not see a conclusive signal one way or the other, or a way to kind of skew the forecast, if you will. For example, when I look at this, the RMM forecast, this is the ECMWF, kind of suggests staying stuck or very slow progression out of phase one. Phase one, this time of year, tends to still be, for most of the composites I've seen, still be mostly warm. Obviously, you have Paul's tool, which suggests some coolness at the end. But then Paul has another tool here, too, which is another type of calendar thing. And it suggests if we get into phase three, as we get into mid and late October, the pattern's still warm. So what I tend to try to look for in the MGO guidance is a clear signal, coherent signal. And when I, again, integrate the various tools that I consider, it's just not there for me. So the bottom line is I'm not skewing the forecast as a function of some of the MGO information. I do want to bring up, though, one other, I guess you could call it risks to the forecast. Um, you know, there is cold air availability here in Western Canada. And so I think that's important, because if the upper air pattern does change, or there's an error, significant error in the dynamic guidance out to day 15, and we do see more of a ridge trough pattern, you can tap into this cold very, very quickly and very easily across Western Canada. And so that could lead to higher than normal errors, or that could lead to a significant forecast change um, with just a a slight or relatively small change in the upper air pattern. You could see a relatively large change in the surface pattern, because instead of this cold being locked up here, it gets into Chicago, Detroit, and some of the major cities. So that was something I considered, and in particular, as I thought about uh, my uncertainty, and I did shift my uncertainty a little bit above the 30-year because of that, and that's how I sort of responded to that. But I just thought that might be worth mentioning, and to see if other folks maybe have some other ideas about how that cold pool may influence the forecast. All right, I think that captures most of my thought process for what it's worth today, and look forward to doing this again next week. Thank you.